Most people are training their core completely wrong and it's impairing their progress. I'm going to shatter 8 core training myths to get you to your goals. I work with some of the strongest athletes in the world, and even they come into me with low back pain because their core isn't working like it's supposed to. And I'm going to show you why. Now, myth number 1 is the six pack. People consider the six pack or the outer core muscles that people can see as the core, and that's partially true. Now, it's nice to look good, right? We all want to have that nice six pack abs, but it doesn't mean that just because you can see the muscles that they're working optimally as they should, because essentially there are 2 systems to the core. We have the inner core system and the outer core system. Now, the inner core consists of your transverse abdominis, your multifidi along the back of the spine, your pelvic floor, and your diaphragm. Now, these work more at a reflex level, but they run deep. They act like a corset for the spine, and they actually decompress. So when they're activated, they cinch in and creates elongation, but they work at a reflex level, and they need to work automatically as well. And they're also a feed forward system. So when we go to think about engaging or moving our arm, these muscles need to reflexively turn on before movement happens. The outer core is your rectus abdominis, your obliques, erector spinae. So those are the outer core muscles. Those are the ones that produce a lot of force and torque. They don't have a lot of tremendous endurance. They don't work at a reflex level. They do support the spine and they are important. But what we need to understand is we need to have the inner core system working just as well as the outer core system. Now, some feel that anything or any muscle attached to the thorax, like the glutes and the lats and the hip flexors, they are considered the core. And in part, they are. But in this video, we're talking about the inner and the outer core system, more specifically around the spine and the pelvis, especially the lower spine, so we can understand what context we're talking about. Now, a great example of this, of where you can see a lot of the core muscles, the outer core muscles, but they're not functioning, is I work with quite a few aesthetic athletes or bodybuilders, and you can see all of their muscles, right? They have very low body fat, but they're a little distended sometimes, and they're coming in with low back pain. And when I get them to engage the inner core with a breath or do some kind of dead bug or some kind of static hold, they're sitting there shaking like a leaf. Now that's indicating that the inner core system isn't doing its job. So they really rely on bracing strategies and compressing the spine, which is what the outer core does. So getting the inner core trained up will, again, elongate that inner spine, decompress it, and then you can use the outer core to compress for bigger movements, such as when we need it for speed, lifting something heavy, or just looking good. But at the end of the day, they're 2 systems and they work together, but sometimes we need to train them a little bit independently or a little bit more specifically to make sure everything's balanced. Core myth number 2, sit-ups are bad for your back. This came out with some now outdated research, because when we do repeated flexion, it puts a lot of strain on the discs of the lumbar spine, which is true. However, the discs can adapt, and it's not necessarily because of a lot of repeated flexion. It's because of a lack of adaptability, maybe some mobility issues, or an imbalance around the trunk system. So we don't want to say sit-ups are bad, because we have to sit up off the ground. We have to sit up out of our chair. So the spine does need to bend. But where we don't want to get caught is doing a lot of repeated flexion, which can put more strain on the discs of the spine. But we want to make sure that the spine does bend in other ways, and that inner core system is working with it as well. Then along came the functional side of things, and everyone said, well, sit-ups are bad, never do them, only do planks, static holds, yada, yada, yada. Well, that doesn't work as well, because we're teaching this neutral spine position, which is helpful to understand when we're picking up something heavy. We need to brace and maintain that ideal alignment. But again, it's not super functional, because the spine does need to bend and twist and be strong in various positions. So when it comes to bending the spine, we just want to make sure that there's balance between the front, the back, the side, inner and outer, and ranges that we are going to move into, we just have to be strong in. Myth number 3, you don't need to do core exercises if you're doing heavy compound exercises. Yes, the core is working when you're doing compound exercises, but just like any muscle group, it can start to lag behind because of a lack of endurance, control, or maybe the periphery is just kind of outrunning the central control or central axis. For example, the world's strongest man, we could say that he has one of the strongest cores because he can lift a tremendous amount of weight. But he does come in to see me with back pain occasionally. Now, when he's doing something like a Atlas stone lift, he's got to flex that spine. He's got to wrap his body around the stone in order to curl down and then curl up and put that stone up on top of a pillar. When he was performing that movement, he would get kind of hitched. He would get caught in a painful range, and he can kind of muscle through it. But it was impairing his performance a little bit. So what we had to do is we had to do a little bit of isolation work just using a simple Swiss ball. He would segmentally curl around the Swiss ball, isolate the lumbar spine, isolate those spinal muscles, and extend all the way back up. We just had to add a little bit of localized strength before we started to reintegrate it with his patterns in his sport. So if pain starts to occur around the spine or the pelvis, we might need to start to isolate and localize some strength in those areas and then reintegrate it with our functional patterns. Myth number 4, planks train the core to be functional. Planks are good, but they don't train it to be functional. Planks teach you the position in which the spine needs to be in for the functional lifts. So for example, when we're doing a plank and we got the ribs down and we're breathing and the tail is tucked and we got that nice long position, if we can hold it for more than a minute, it's not really doing much anymore. We need to move with that position or out of that position. So we want to use and retrain planks to set up a push-up. We want to use them to set up a deadlift. We want to use them to set up a squat, because at the top of those positions, when we're hip hinging and we're coming out, when we're locking out, it's a standing plank. When we're squatting, it's a standing plank. When we're in a push-up, it's a standing plank. When we're doing pull-ups, it's more of a hollow because we're in an open kinetic chain, but the idea is the same. The plank teaches the position and the position sets up the power. Clients who have low back pain, teaching them that ideal plank position or that position to teach them how to breathe under tension, get them to relax other muscles such as their neck and only draw tension into their lower back or into the trunk and the pelvis. Well, that's going to teach them how to, again, elongate, strengthen, but then once they master that position, they start to move out of that position. So we get them crawling, we get them to bend and twist, because early on, if we get somebody to bend and twist and they have pain with those movements, it's not ideal because pain will inhibit those local core muscles. So getting them an isometric exercise to teach the position, teach the nervous system it's okay to be here, this is a safe place, is a good place to start, but we do need to move them out of that position once pain is settled and once they've developed a set amount of endurance and strength. Myth number 5, your back pain is from a weak core. This is often not the case. I mean, how often do we see clients who just bend over to pick up a shoe or something arbitrary and all of a sudden their back went out? It wasn't because they're lifting up something heavy. It's often maybe they hit a range of motion that they weren't prepared for. Maybe there's some repetitive strain there where the muscles just fatigued on them. So essentially it comes down to a timing issue or a muscular endurance issue or just a lack of strength or control in a specific range. So in order to retrain this, the core actually works at a reflex level. So when we look at EMGs, when they're measuring the amount of muscle activity around the trunk, when we're thinking about movement, just about 0.2 seconds before we lift a limb or we kick a leg, the core muscles come on. So there's this feed forward system. It's an anticipatory system. When there's back pain or there's dysfunction in the system, there's a lag in this. So what happens is movement happens, nervous system's like, oh, we're late. They compress and lock down, and all of a sudden it locks up the spine, but it's kind of not in this ideal position anymore. And we've compressed joints or we pinched a nerve or what have you. So we want to retrain the timing of the core first. And the best way to do that is actually with breathing. So when we take a breath in and we take a breath out and we create that, that small hole that we can breathe through, and you can feel the belly button pull in towards the spine, and it acts like a corset, right? It comes back down to that decompression of the spine. We've got to retrain the timing of the core. And once we do that consciously, well, really more reflexively, then it starts to become more automatic in the system again. The other part of it is it's an endurance issue. So a lot of us have enough strength to move about our day. A lot of us have enough strength to pick up something once and move it. But then if we do that repeatedly, all of a sudden we're like, my back hurts or I tweak something. It's an endurance issue. So we need to train the core muscles, not necessarily, yes, to be strong, but they need endurance as well. So building up those repetitions over time is critical for low back health and to help your clients keep that back pain away. Number 6, this one kind of drives me bonkers, is you can consciously contract the inner core. I remember in physio school, we'd be doing palpation on the rectus abdominis and just off the side, and you try and get your fellow student to consciously contract the transverse abdominis. That is not how it works. It works at a reflex level. So it's a reflex muscle, as we mentioned earlier. It comes on, it's a feed forward and a feedback system. And it's not something we can consciously do. However, we can train it up with another reflex, that is breathing. So if we utilize the diaphragm, because the diaphragm is the top part of the box, top part of the core system, if we exhale under pursed lips, you'll feel everything cinch in. Well, that's going to reflexively contract the transverse abdominis. And then you can also contract the pelvic floor below. So we can't sit there and just contract, because if we think about trying to contract the core muscles, we're just going to contract the rectus abdominis and obliques. They're just going to come in and compress. So, but we can retrain it with the breathing reflex so that we can get better contraction. And again, come back to that timing issue that some of us have lost. Myth number 7, dead bugs, bird dogs, and pelvic tilts are a waste of time. If you are already at a level of a strong core, then maybe they are, right? So we don't want to do dead bugs if we can crawl. We don't want to do dead bugs if we can sprint. We don't want to do dead bugs if we can do other things. But for a lot of people, for a lot of our clients who are coming in with low back pain, this is a great place to start, because the dead bug, it gives them that spine supported position where we first start to learn how to move as babies. They're working that contralateral cross chord reflex. We're working breathing. So there's lots of things that we can kind of bring in and bring awareness to our clients in that spine supported position while they're focusing on retraining the core. Timing, breathing, disassociation of the neck. I can get that. And then what we can do is when we go into a bird dog, we go into that quadruped. So now we're in a spine suspended position. They can feel where that spine and pelvis is supposed to rock and tilt. Hold that against gravity, and then they get that contralateral arm and leg movement going. Why is that important? Well, walking, because walking is this cross chord contralateral opposite arm, opposite leg swing. Well, that's what the dead bug and the bird dog train. So going back down to these more simplistic exercises, especially again, when we have people in pain, when we have dysfunction, when we have inhibition, when we have poor endurance, sometimes we need to go back down to these more primitive positions, retrain how the core and spine is supposed to control itself, and then work our way back up. But if they can do it, don't go there. Go do something else that's a little bit more challenging for your clients so that they get the maximum benefits of a core exercise. And lastly, number 8, you can't train your core every day. I guess that depends on what you consider training. If you're looking at ballistics and heavy weights and hard isometrics, yeah, you probably can't do that every day. The muscles do need recovery. The nervous system does need recovery because a lot of those movements require skill. And the higher the skill, the higher intensity, the higher load, the more the nervous system needs to recover. Now, the core muscles are endurance muscles as well. So it depends on the level of core training that you're going to do. If one day you're doing a lot of medicine ball throws and a lot of front levers and jumping, then probably the next day, maybe we do a little bit of crawling, maybe we do some groundwork, maybe we do some rolling. So you're still working the core because the core is working every day. It has to, or else we'd fall forward. It helps support our body. But we can just level up or level down depending on what the goal is, but you can train your core every day. It's just be smart about your training. I hope you found this video helpful to help debunk some of the myths out there, at least some of the half-truths that are on the interweb. Just understanding that the core is so much more than just what it looks like and some of the exercises. Understand how it integrates and functions with human movement, with our physiology, with our neurology. We can better serve the clients that come to us in pain and also improve the output and performance of our athletes. If you want to fix your core or prevent injuries, or you work with clients who you want to improve their core strength and reduce injuries, hit subscribe now. I've got some game-changing tips in the next video.